this week in privacy, right off the bat, this already maybe not privacy centric too much, but there was a story about how Facebook had a fine with the FTC, and shareholders are alleging, no proof whatsoever quite yet, um, that the fine would have been closer to 100 million, but Facebook paid out 5 billion with a B in order to avoid executives like Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg from having to testify or being named personally in some of the I would say complaints or legal filings. And so, I mean, 100 million to 5 billion, quite the number jump. And again, it's allegations, I guess, from shareholders. But even if there's any shred of truth in this, quite, uh, yeah. I mean, what do you guys think about those
Can we
numbers?
just take a step back and think it? First of all, 106 million is a lot to me. I think it's kind of a lot. 5 billion, but think of what it is to Facebook. That's like chump change, and so it's actually more important to them to pay the 5 billion and protect, the chief executives and the C-level folks from, I guess, going through the grilling.
Yeah, getting
Um,
deposed.
yeah, so it's more important for them to pay the 5 billion and shield them from that than to pay 106 million and maybe have some discomfort. I find that really amazing that they are that big where they can kind of scruff off 5 billion just because they don't want to have their folks get a stern talking to. That's amazing to me.
If there is any truth to this, and again, these are allegations, something sketchy. There's no doubt about it, right?
I mean, 50x for the fine, like
50x
willingly. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And there is another aspect to it where, the money is coming from Facebook, the company, but the the these executives were pocketing profits privately, but the losses are public. In this case, company is paying for it, and that's why the investors are freaked out about it. And unfortunately, this is pretty common in the industry, and that's a sad part, where executives profit from through their bonuses or whatnot. Shareholders to others are essentially screwed. And how many times have we seen it? But yet we haven't figured out a way to fix this, and that's the core issue here.
I'm going to put this back up because I thought this was interesting. The alleged second lawsuit that Facebook's privacy controls are not operating with sufficient effectiveness to provide assurance to protect privacy. Do you think Mark and Cheryl want to talk about that in Congress? What's going on with that? I just think, and like you said, you guys are exactly right. All this stuff is alleged. Like, I don't I don't know for sure if they'd rather pay 5 billion than 100. But if that article is correct, if this article is correct, maybe they don't want to get into. There's a lot of stuff they don't want to get into. Let's just kind of be honest about it.
Right.
So and they've had a pretty excuse me rough couple of weeks. I mean, they had to come out with the apology around their AI going crazy and not being able to tell a black woman from or black men from primate. They've had this ongoing thing with researchers who are trying to get access to information to study where certain things are going in terms of, in terms of a lot of things what's going on with Facebook. But it's just an onslaught. And if I just go back to this, they are willing to pay allegedly willing to pay $5 billion instead of 106
million.
That's staggering to me.
By the way, do you guys know what happens to the money that is collected through these fines?
I was gonna ask the exact same question. Like, I don't even like GDPR fines and stuff like that, right? Like, 5 billion is not a small chunk of change, right? I mean, it's got to go somewhere. I mean,
Does it
it'd
go
be
to like the food fund for getting more sodas and drinks and snacks for the team? I don't know.
For the
That's a lot of
FTC?
money.
For the FTC or SEC? I know there is also, whenever there is an abuse, there is an issue, a company pays a fine, and consumers get what, $1.50 or $3.20 or whatever, right? And majority of them goes uncollected. I'm curious what happens to those. Do the companies get to keep it? Does FTC use it for some other purpose, or does that convert into a bonus for the FTC or the SEC employees? I'm just curious what happens to that.
I mean, it could just pump into like the what do you call organizations like OPEX and just increases the funding for future litigation, possibly. But yeah, that's a good question. Doesn't I mean maybe we can figure that out for next week. But yeah,
Well,
I can't
and then
imagine
the
it's
other-
used well. I think we can all agree on that one.
And then the other thing is, okay, so you pay your fine, whether it's 100 or 5 billion. Do you get forced to change anything? Or is it just, they paid the fine? It doesn't, I don't feel like there's enough going on to tell, like you were saying, where the money goes, but what structural changes have to be in place? Or do they just feel like, we print money, so we'll be fine with just paying the fine every whatever it is, as long as we don't have to say nothing to anybody, we'll pay the fine. We're good with that.
Yeah, I remember
think
the
it
case where I remember the case where I was in San Francisco, and the parking fees are exorbitant. So I ended up, I think, parking in a spot where parking tickets were cheaper than the parking lot fee. It feels the same way here, where paying the fines is much better than the preventing the abuse in the first case. I think the entire structure there has to change. It has to change towards maybe a percentage of revenue keeps increasing for recurring abuses, and that way till they fix it, this is not going to change. And the definition of fix itself has to be closely monitored, but unless it is a percentage of revenue, all of these becomes a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to what Brent said too, even when companies get fined, like the disclosure is limited, right? Like if one person is in the news and like paying attention to these things, you see about these articles, but for a regular Facebook user, will they ever know that something like Facebook was doing something nefarious? I don't think they ever would, right? So unless there's like some user disclosure that has to happen, I think for like data breaches, sometimes we'll get an email from like the law firm, generally about class action stuff, but even if there is a breach or something, you'll generally get an email about something. But in Facebook case, if they were deliberately doing something, I guess, immoral or unethical or illegal, then it should be disclosed to people directly in the product through an email. They'll send you a notification because your friend posted a picture of a cat, but won't send you a notification about some crazy thing like this. And I think it goes for like almost any industry. If you're getting in trouble with the law, the customers have a right to know about, what happened, what steps are being done to mitigate it. Is it just a cash fine and move on, or are we going to be able to see some sort of tangible changes within the product and then move forward with that? So hopefully, I would say future rulings would include some sort of disclosure concept to it. Otherwise, the average person has no idea, and like Raju said, it's a slap on the wrist and a cost of doing business, nothing more.
And I think what happens is these so-called settlements. I have an issue with that. A company basically makes a major abuses. Someone sues, they settle. What does that mean? If I'm the consumer, I'm affected. What does that settlement mean for me as a consumer? That thing has to be disclosed. Are they stopping the practice? No, each other exchange some money and be done with it. And I think comes back to the actual consumers who are affected by it. Those are all issues that have to be addressed. It's not just paying a fine and moving on or going back to the business.
It's bad when Tejas breaks out nefarious. Gotta watch out for that.
Try to use a new word every week. But not to mention on that front too, and now you made me lose my train of thought. I had something on what Roger was saying. Anyways, whatever, I'll save it for next time. Threw me off. The next topic to talk about is what's going on in Illinois. So, I mean, Illinois did a really good thing, I thought. They basically have a no facial recognition law in place. But then this article kind of talks about how, like, in Missouri, there is no such law. In Illinois, there is. And, over the past couple episodes, we've talked a lot about how, the internet would probably become a lot more decentralized country by country. Here, we're even seeing privacy rights on a state-by-state basis as well. And so even just navigating where is facial recognition okay, where is data, I would say transparency okay, like California, Colorado, some of those laws that are out there. And then in this case, it's just kind of like, you could cross a state line and in some case be like just on a highway and have no idea what rights you're giving up by just driving through a state or being in that state, right? Um, I would argue that even if you sign up for a service as crazy as something like Facebook, at least you get terms of service, whether you read them or not. But when you go state by state and then there's different collections and different rules and regulations in terms of how your privacy is going to be violated without having any kind of disclosure short of reading the laws before you go into that state, it kind of sucks, to be honest with you. I mean, it's good that some states take things more seriously than others, but it's also kind of not good because you don't really know what you're walking into and what you're giving up just by being in that state.
I think, first thing you have to commend Illinois for adopting this. That's a good positive move, and particularly biometric and unfortunately, I mean, we have seen this particularly with facial recognition and whatnot. It's gonna be here unless we act on it, and it's gonna be present in pretty much any product. I don't think we haven't seen enough products yet, but it's a matter of time before Face ID or equivalent of that becomes the way your door is unlocked in your front door. So there'll be some locks that will be coming up for that. Maybe your car will unlock based on your Face ID, and all of these are as you enter your office building, your employer will use Face ID as this thing instead of carrying your knob or key or whatnot. So these are just various products that will come out as a where they end up using these biometric as an option. Now, is that okay? I mean, end of the day, it has to come from the employees buying into it, and they should have an option to opt out of it. I think those are critical pieces. But the reason Face ID and all of these work is, from a business point of view, betting on people's laziness is always a good bet. So if some technology makes people lazy, that's always a good bet from a business point of view. Because pulling out your credit card at a grocery store is I guess inefficient compared to just scanning your palm and then checking out, right? So that is where all these companies are betting on people's laziness, and that from their point of view, it's a good bet. Unfortunately, that you give up a lot of things because of that convenience.
I'm starting to think, how certain states have a big piece of the incorporation puzzle, and like states like Delaware and Nevada, and maybe some of the states like Texas that don't have state taxes. Do you think we're going to get to a point where companies are going to look at privacy laws and regulations as a piece of the puzzle to determining where they decide to incorporate? Like, because data is becoming so critical, and it's coming in all these different forms, and you can't even keep up with it. And, now we got the biometrics, and each state is going to start creating their own rules and regulation and laws. Do you think that companies are going to start saying, we need to incorporate over here because they let us do anything we want with our customers' data, whereas if we go over here, no, we're not going to be able to do that?
I think that's where we are headed, Brent. Just like laws are better in some states, there are multiple angles to it. There the incorporation laws, then there are the taxation, and then there are these privacy laws and whatnot. There is going to be an equivalent of, say, Wyoming or a Nevada or a Delaware equivalent of privacy, where they'll be friendly towards companies that are maybe abusing the privacy. Well, I think those, depending on your business model, you may end up incorporating that. Unfortunately, that's where we are headed, and that also is can be applied globally. A European company will have to adhere to a stricter laws compared to, say, a US company or company from other countries, and that will also be at play. And they'll be doing it for, say, competitive reasons to drive business to whatnot. But I think we are entering that world where the walls will certainly come up between the states or between the countries, which means the water, or in this case, the companies will flow towards states and countries that are friendly to their business model.
Yeah, I mean, it almost feels like there should be like a flow chart between how important is privacy to you, like where you should kind of end up as things get more and more distributed, right? You can kind of start an online software company or whatever anywhere you want to. So it's just kind of aligning where your morals basically are protected in that state. There was also on a tangent, I guess, like even to what Brent was saying about starting a company in different states. I remember seeing Colorado, I think, passed some law about like remote workers, and there was a big thing about how a lot of companies will have job postings for remote work anywhere in the U.S., but it specifically excludes Colorado because Colorado has some like additional protection for remote workers, and states will now just basically exclude Colorado applicants, or companies will exclude Colorado applicants because of whatever additional regulation or stuff they have to go through. So I mean, I think we'll see it get a lot messier before it gets clean cut anytime soon. So,
and if you look at that article, why they adopt such biometric things, there are some certainly use cases for it where when there is an abuse, you get to recognize the abuser and then go with it. But this is always the case where the abuse is always, in most of the cases, it's a single digit percentage, but then you're punishing 95% of the people because there is an abuse by a small percentage. This always happens in across various industries out there. You're punishing the majority because of a minority, and this has been an issue. And biometric laws and biometric recognition, they make the case using the minority as an example and use that as a reason to abuse the majority's freedom.
Yeah, and then even on that quote that you had up there last time, the whole aspect of like David and Goliath fight seems like a probably underreported thing. But as a concerned citizen, maybe one or two people, a small organization, if you find someone violating things, are you really going to go up with the Fortune 10, Fortune 50, Fortune 5,000, even companies' legal squad, right? You're going to get crushed every single time. And why is that onus on the private citizen to like bring litigation or bring attention to an issue? It's just not worth the effort, right? Like you're better off just not using the service and then quietly, going about your way. And so hopefully, FTC or government can come up with some better maybe protections for these allegations, because I think the big companies know that, who can go toe to toe with us in a legal court. Not a lot of people, right? There's like the top 5 tech companies, and then probably a pretty big drop off in terms of how much money they're willing to spend to defend themselves or to litigate an issue. So,
hey, we know that they're willing to pay $5 billion over $100 million if it keeps them from having to talk. So,
allegedly,
we got to see.
So I guess there is a need for a startup for that. That's a startup idea, Tejas.
There you go.
So, and that will get a bunch of investment, and it'll become. I bet that'll become a unicorn in 4 months.
4 months. So by episode 60 something, I'll be on a beach somewhere and not in this conversation anymore.
Yeah. Where did Tejas go?
I'll start my own privacy focused country. We'll host a podcast from there. But we'll switch gears to the last topic, the last news article for the week. This was one that we've kind of hinted on, but we haven't really dived into it. We probably should a lot more. It's about this company called App Annie. And I think most people who are not developers, especially not mobile developers, probably have never heard of these people. But App Annie basically offers a service, I would say, kind of similar to Mixpanel in terms of you embed their software or their SDK essentially within your application that you've developed, whether it's a mobile game or a mobile app or whatever it is. I think they might have web aspects to it too. And it'll do tracking for you, right? It'll tell you if the app crashes and how many people are accessing it, what the usage patterns are, and kind of help a developer basically optimize their app based on usage. Seems kind of straightforward. But the dangerous part, obviously, is that they offer a free version called Connect. And developers can use it. And by using that free version, to see all the analytics of an application, what's actually happening is all the data from the application developers' users is being sent back to App Annie and then being bundled together and then sold off as aggregate data to a bunch of different companies. And so in general, I guess developers are going to use free tools because naturally they're going to be cost conscious, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as they say, like if the tool is free, then you're paying one way or another. There's no free lunch, and so you know, the App Annie just seems to have a history of, like, I would say, nefarious activities, because they've gotten in like a bunch of trouble over the years. I think the past like 7-8 years, the government has basically levied some sort of complaint about them in terms of data sharing, in terms of agreements, in terms of partnerships that they have, misleading terms and conditions. And it's, to sum it up, I guess really like on a website on your computer, you can install like an ad blocker and you can kind of see all the connections that are happening if you really wanted to. On the mobile app, it's far more complicated if you want to do it, and nobody's going to go through that effort. So what's cooking under an app when you run it on your iPhone or Android is a lot of stuff, and you have no idea generally what type of data is being collected, how many places it's being sent to. And I'd argue that these mobile apps are far worse than websites, because at least websites, ad blockers or tracking or incognito modes or different browsers, you can kind of switch around. But on a phone, you can't really make those kind of changes. And then I'd say once your phone's been fingerprinted, which it easily has been based on that number of apps, the types of apps most people use on their phones, it's game over. So I mean, I'm not really sure there's any way to get out of that. But yeah, this App Annie story, small fine in the grand scheme of things, 10 million. I think they make something like 150 to maybe 200 million in revenue. So 5%, not crazy, but I guess not small either for them. And yeah, what do you guys think about these folks?
Well, if you're not familiar with App Annie, they're like Google Analytics for mobile apps. So they basically grab everything from a developer's point of view. They give you all the information. Now you know why Google Analytics exists, and it is for free. These are all Trojan horses to get a lot of information. It certainly offers value to the developer, because you know how many people are using the app and the usage patterns to whatnot, which device, which mobile devices, and of course across operating system, across locations. So which means the traffic is pretty prevalent. The reason these guys got in trouble is, my guess is, it got customers from unexpected places, so-called investors, and that is where investors were using App Annie information to guess the traffic of a particular mobile app. Imagine during the pandemic, Netflix app went from, say, number 20 to number 5, and investors now will be able to guess how many users they would have acquired and make an investment, stock purchase to whatnot, and they were using it for that purpose. That's where my guess is App Annie wouldn't have expected this use case, but these are all various ways this app is being used. And I guess you can safely assume that Google, thanks to Google Analytics, knows a lot about businesses and the websites and traffic they receive, and maybe even which business they have to get into next, or which company they have to acquire next, because they have all the data. This is the same thing in a smaller scale, and because it is investors using it to trade, then SEC came into action and they had to sue them. So, but that is the context. Again, there are going to be second level and third level implications of tracking and pulling together the data. But these challenges are real. Now this has come out, but I'm sure there are other abuses that we are not familiar with, that haven't come out, that are very prevalent in the industry.
I like this piece of it. Let me bring this back up. App Annie, for its part, didn't admit to the agency's findings, but it didn't deny them either. That's a kind of an interesting, what is that? I mean, I guess there's some legal reason and maybe some financial reason why they can't say it, but come on, we can read between the lines.
Now I remember what I was going to say earlier when Brent left me off my mind. It was, with these settlements in general, right? Oftentimes you'll see that it says, so-and-so does not admit to guilt, but is settled, right? And like, that's some kind of big thing. And it kind of blows my mind, because like a company will go through hoops to basically get that line that says, the company is not admitting guilt. But it's like, who cares, right? Like, is that really what you're fighting for? And you'll pay a higher fine to not admit guilt that like is not held against you in any way. I'm sure there might be some legal way in the future if they get caught again. It's like, oh, they already admitted guilty to one thing, so maybe they're not going to get so lenient treatment in the future. But just like that, like guilt thing, I feel like it should be pressed a lot more, because it's like company has to come up and say that we did something wrong, and right, we got in trouble, we got caught, we did something wrong, we apologize, right? That's arguably the most like human aspect of doing anything wrong, whether it's ill-intentioned or well-intentioned that just didn't work out well. It's fine either way. Just be like, we screwed up, I'm sorry, and here's the fine to make up for it, and we'll do better next time, hopefully. Or even in PR speak, it seems like a good idea, just from a PR angle alone.
What does humanity have to do with the law? I mean, come on now.
It seems like a simple like moral win. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't press that a little bit more. It seems like it would be a win-win.
If a company is willing to pay $5 billion instead of $100 million for not having to get on, and have to go under oath and tell the truth,
answer questions, yeah,
I think we kind of know what the deal is. It's pretty amazing, but you're right. It's pretty amazing.